Imagine, just for a second, that a fire alarm goes off in your house right now.
Oh man, instant panic.
Right. Your heart starts racing, your adrenaline completely spikes, and you drop absolutely everything you are doing to go fix the problem.
You don't even think about it. Your biology just takes over.
Exactly. Because you perceive this immediate existential threat. Well, today on this deep dive, we are looking at this incredibly modern phenomenon where we are treating a kid staring blankly at a wall with that exact same level of medical urgency.
It's wild when you frame it like that.
It really is. Like, we have collectively categorized boredom as this absolute crisis. And as we're about to find out, jumping in to put out that imaginary fire is literally rewiring human brains.
It's a fascinating shift. And honestly, it's a terrifying shift in human behavior.
Yeah.
Because if you look at the reality of modern households, and we really want to stress this, this isn't happening out of malice.
No, not at all. Parents aren't trying to damage their kids.
Right. They are just trying to survive a Tuesday evening. But by treating this totally neutral state of mind as a problem that has to be eradicated, we are systematically altering the neurological development of a whole generation.
Which is exactly the core of what we are digging into today. For you listening, we're exploring this rapidly changing landscape of parenting, the actual literal biological science of how a brain develops.
Which is so cool.
It's mind-blowing. And we're also getting into the really high-stakes balance between rules and relationships.
Yeah, that's the big one.
Right. So our guiding framework for this deep dive comes from the insights of a veteran educator and commentator, affectionately known as Papa Bear, alongside this brilliant neurological research from social psychologist Jonathan Heidt.
Specifically looking at this phenomenon called pruning the brain, right?
Exactly, pruning the brain. But I think we really need to ground this in the messy, sweaty reality of raising kids today.
Oh, absolutely, because it is incredibly easy to sit in a studio and just quote data at people.
Oh, for sure.
But it is so much harder to actually be a parent at like 6 in the evening. You're exhausted from work, you're trying to cook dinner, and your 7-year-old is having a total meltdown because they literally have nothing to do.
The exhaustion is so real. But if we can take a step back, and look at the actual mechanics of what is happening beneath the surface of that boredom, I mean, it completely changes how we view our role in those high-stress moments.
It really does.
So let's start exactly there. Let's unpack this concept of the empty space.
Right.
Papa Bear throws out this central premise that honestly reframes the entire job description of a parent.
Right.
He argues that kid boredom is just not an adult's problem to solve.
Which, I mean, that runs completely counter to the modern parenting ethos.
Totally. Right now, there's this pervasive, almost suffocating belief out there that children require this constant curated entertainment.
Like every single minute has to be scheduled.
Yes, it's like modern parents have accidentally turned themselves into these frantic cruise ship directors.
Oh my gosh, that is the perfect analogy.
You know the vibe, right? Like, okay, it's 10 a.m., time for the sensory bin, and then at 10:15 we have the educational sing-along.
And then at 10:30 we transition to organic block building.
Exactly. It's exhausting just thinking about it. But so if a parent isn't supposed to be the cruise director, what is actually happening when a kid is just sitting there on the rug whining that they have nothing to do?
To understand that, we really have to look at the psychology of boredom itself.
Okay.
Boredom is not just some empty void. It is actually a state of acute cognitive discomfort.
Discomfort?
Yeah.
Like it physically bothers them?
Yes. When the brain is understimulated, when there's no external input telling it what to think or what to process, it gets agitated.
Okay, I can see that.
But here is the critical part. To escape that discomfort, the brain is forced to invent.
Oh, wow.
Right. It starts connecting disparate ideas. It starts daydreaming. It imagines scenarios. Biologically speaking, boredom is the catalyst for creativity.
So by swooping in with a color-coded schedule or an activity every single time they sigh and say, I'm bored, we are basically interrupting the creative process before it even has a chance to boot up.
Exactly. We are completely unintentionally barricading the very space where their imagination lives.
Yeah, it is wild.
Because if a child never actually has to invent a game out of, say, a cardboard box and a stick in the backyard.
Right, the classic kid stuff.
Exactly. If they never do that, they aren't exercising the neural pathways that are responsible for self-directed thought and problem solving.
And the sources say Papa Bear sees the downstream effects of this constantly in his classroom, doesn't he?
All the time. And it's really concerning.
What does that actually look like in a practical setting? Like, how does a lack of boredom at age 5 translate to a kid sitting at a desk at age 10?
Well, it manifests as this absolute zero-tolerance policy for friction.
Zero tolerance for friction. Unpack that for me.
So he observes these students who will finish a worksheet or an assignment, and they immediately sprint up to his desk to ask, what do I do next?
They can't just sit there for a minute.
No, they literally cannot tolerate 60 seconds of unstructured time. Or the second they hit even a minor obstacle in a math problem like a tiny bit of intellectual friction, they immediately rush to an adult for help.
Because they haven't developed the capacity to just sit in that neutral space of not knowing.
Precisely. They have been trained, essentially conditioned, that an adult will always provide the immediate next step.
But let's look at it from the parent's perspective for a second, because I want to be fair here.
Of course.
When you feel that anxiety, because let's be real, a bored kid whining in the kitchen while you're trying to chop onions is highly anxiety-inducing.
Oh, it's the worst sound in the world.
It really is.
Yeah.
So you naturally reach for the fastest, most effective pacifier available to mankind. You reach for the screen.
Yep. The tablet, the phone.
And it works instantly. The whining just stops. But Papa Bear's sources draw this massive bright red line between the screens of yesterday and the screens of today.
And that is a distinction we really need to highlight.
Because aren't tablets basically just smaller, more convenient televisions? I mean, I grew up watching a ton of TV.
Right, and that is probably the most dangerous misconception of the modern era. We absolutely cannot equate the media consumption of 30 years ago with what is happening on a touchscreen today.
Okay, so walk me through that. Because humans are, at our core, social creatures, right?
Definitely.
We're natural storytellers. I mean, for as long as language has existed, we have raised our kids on stories. Our brains actually need lots of patterns to develop properly.
Yes, and the source material even notes that stories are essentially good for the soul.
Right. Narrative gives us a framework for empathy and consequences and all that human behavior stuff. And when we look back at the era of television, which was the primary screen for our generation,
What was the biggest fear parents had back then?
literally just don't sit too close to the TV, you'll ruin your eyesight.
Exactly.
That was it. My parents didn't think it was rotting my personality. They just thought it was frying my retinas.
Right, and that's because television operates on this psychological principle called transportation.
Transportation.
Yes, it's a completely passive medium. It slowly pulls you into a narrative. You sit there for 30 minutes or maybe an hour, and you slowly learn about these characters.
You start to understand their motivations.
Exactly, and eventually you find yourself rooting for them.
Okay.
This process is actively tuning the brain to social patterns. It's teaching sequence, cause and effect. And crucially, it requires a prolonged period of sustained attention without any instant reinforcement.
Ah, I see. Because the television doesn't know you are there.
Exactly. It doesn't respond to you.
I mean, you can yell at the TV, you can jump up and down on the couch, but the story just keeps playing at its own pace.
Right. But a touchscreen is entirely reliant on your physical interaction.
Which is why the sources describe the modern touchscreen device not as a television, but as a Skinner box.
Yes, the Skinner box.
Okay, I know B.F. Skinner is this foundational figure in psychology, with the rats and the pigeons.
Right.
But bring that into the modern living room for us. How does a 1950s behaviorist experiment relate to a toddler on a couch with an iPad?
So Skinner designed these experimental chambers where an animal, let's say a pigeon, had a little disc it could peck.
Okay.
If it pecked the disc, it got a tiny bit of grain, food.
A reward.
Right. But Skinner's massive breakthrough was discovering the incredible power of the schedule of those rewards.
The schedule, like timing.
Sort of. If you give the pigeon food every single time it pecks the disc, it eventually just gets full and walks away. It gets bored.
Sure, that makes sense.
But if you deliver the food on what he called a variable ratio, meaning the pigeon has no idea if the reward is coming on the first peck, the 7th peck, or the 20th peck,
Oh, wow.
the animal becomes completely obsessed. It will peck at that disc, frantically, endlessly, driven entirely by the unpredictable anticipation.
So, tech companies didn't just invent a new way to watch cartoons. They literally took Skinner's variable ratio reward system and built it directly into the interface of every single app our kids use.
Precisely. They employ literal armies of neuroscientists to optimize this exact loop. The touchscreen loop is just relentless. It goes Stimulate, respond, swipe.
Stimulate, respond, swipe.
And then the variable reward. Maybe the next video is hilarious and your brain gets this massive dopamine hit. Maybe the next level of the game gives you a burst of digital confetti and a super satisfying sound effect.
Maybe it doesn't.
Exactly. Maybe the next 3 videos are totally boring. So what do?
You swipe again.
And again. You swipe again. We are essentially handing a toddler a miniature, perfectly engineered slot machine.
We are literally putting them inside the Skinner box.
We are. And that screen demands interaction. It physically conditions the child to expect an immediate visceral response to every single physical action they take. So this isn't just a matter of wasting time. It is actively rewiring the child's brain architecture. It pulls them away from sustained, patient focus and pushes them toward hyper-fragmented attention and instant gratification.
And to really grasp just how permanent this rewiring is, we have to look under the hood of a child's brain development.
Yeah, this is where it gets really biological.
We have to talk about what is physically happening inside their skulls. And this is where Jonathan Haidt's research comes in, and it is, honestly, it's staggering.
It really is.
He points out that a human brain reaches about 90% of its full adult size by the time a child is just 5 or 6 years old.
90%. By age 5, it's an incredible biological feat when you actually stop and think about it.
It's wild. The mass of the brain is basically complete before they even finish the first grade.
Right. So at 6 years old, the brain doesn't actually need to grow much larger in size. In fact, Heidt points out that at this age, the child's brain actually has way too many neurons.
Wait, too many?
Yes. It is completely overstuffed with potential connections, and it's a brilliant evolutionary strategy.
How so?
Well, because a human baby doesn't know if it's going to be born into, a frozen tundra during the Ice Age, or a complex agricultural society, or a modern digital metropolis.
Oh, that makes sense.
So the brain overproduces neurons to prepare the child to adapt to literally any environment on Earth.
Okay, and here's the mechanism that Heidt describes, which really brings this all together for the deep dive. As a child, perform certain actions, whether that's throwing a baseball, reading a physical book, or swiping a piece of glass.
Right.
The specific neurons associated with those actions are reinforced.
Because they are being used.
Right, and because they are used, they start this process called myelination.
Yes. And myelination is arguably one of the most important concepts for any parent to understand.
Can you break that down for us? What is myelin?
So myelin is this fatty insulating substance that physically wraps around the nerve fibers in the brain. If you think about an electrical wire in your house, myelin is like the rubber casing on the outside of the wire.
Got it.
When a neural pathway is myelinated, the electrical signals travel significantly faster, they're much more efficient, and they're more secure.
It's like taking a bumpy dirt road in the brain and paving it over with smooth asphalt to create a 10-lane superhighway.
That is a perfect way to picture it. The brain observes the child's behavior and basically says, oh, okay, we seem to be using this specific pathway all the time. Let's upgrade the infrastructure right here.
Wow.
It connects new synapses and really strengthens that specific ability. But here's the catch. Because the human brain operates on finite energy and has a finite physical space inside the skull, it has to make brutal choices.
The pruning.
Exactly, the pruning. The neurons and the pathways that are not being used, the skills the child is not actively practicing, those neurons are deprived of resources.
And what happens to them?
They simply die off.
They literally die.
Yes, the brain kills them off for the sake of efficiency.
That is, man.
Yeah.
Papa Bear's sources liken this to a master sculptor. You start with this massive, overwhelming block of marble at age 5, and the brain spends the next decade meticulously pruning away the stone it decides it doesn't need.
Just chipping away the excess.
Chipping it away to reveal the permanent statue underneath.
And we really have to recognize the absolute ruthlessness of this biological imperative.
Yeah.
The brain does not possess a moral compass. It doesn't know what is quote-unquote good or bad for the child's long-term happiness or their career prospects.
Right. Doesn't care if they get into a good college.
It only knows what is practiced. It is a highly efficient, entirely blind machine. It keeps what it uses and it permanently discards the rest.
Let's just pause and really let that sink in for a second. If you were a parent listening to this right now, and you are allowing the primary, most heavily reinforced action during these deeply formative years to be your child sitting stationary.
Right.
Swiping a piece of glass to get a variable dopamine hit. What kind of statue are you carving?
You are carving a brain that is biologically optimized for short attention spans, immediate gratification, and purely digital interaction.
Wow.
And simultaneously, and this is the real tragedy of the pruning process, because the other pathways aren't being used, you are actively commanding the brain to kill off the neurological capacity for sustained focus.
Because they never use it.
Exactly. You're killing off the pathways for deep reading, physical world problem solving, and complex face-to-face empathy.
We are literally letting tech companies and variable ratio algorithms dictate which of our children's synapses get to live and which have to die.
It is a massive abdication of environmental control. We are basically handing the sculptor's chisel over to the algorithm.
And while this foundational pruning, this initial rough carving of the marble, so to speak, happens in early childhood, the absolute peak of this brain remodeling happens a few years later, right?
Yes. There is a second, incredibly sensitive window where the final details of the statue are locked in permanently.
Puberty.
Puberty, the transition phase where identity is truly forged.
So what's happening in the brain during puberty?
It's a period of intense, incredibly rapid brain plasticity. The brain is converting from the flexible, less efficient child form into the solid, highly efficient adult form.
Yeah.
The child form is designed to absorb, the adult form is designed to execute. So during puberty, the brain locks into a particular culture and a particular way of operating.
The source material uses this really incredible analogy about language to explain this locking mechanism, and I want to share it because it makes it so clear.
Yeah, the language analogy is fantastic.
If a child learns a completely new language before the age of 12, they will likely speak it with absolutely no accent.
None at all.
They will sound entirely indistinguishable from a native speaker.
Okay.
And that's because the brain is still in that flexible child form, so it just seamlessly integrates the new phones and grammar rules.
But if that exact same person starts learning that exact same language at age 14, just 2 years later, the outcome is entirely different.
Because the window closed.
Exactly. They will almost certainly have a noticeable accent for the rest of their natural lives.
Because the brain lost that specific type of plasticity. It can no longer just seamlessly take in and format a new system from scratch. It's locked.
And that locking mechanism doesn't just apply to vocabulary, It applies to culture, to socialization, moral frameworks, and their core identity.
Right.
In traditional societies, throughout the vast, vast majority of human history, this specific window of puberty was deeply revered.
It was actively managed by the adults in the community.
Highly managed. This is the period when children were historically separated from their parents and guided through structured, very intentional rites of passage.
Right. So the adults of the community step in. Women taking the young girls to teach them the rights and responsibilities of womanhood, men taking the young boys to teach them the rights of manhood.
Exactly.
It was this highly orchestrated handoff of cultural identity from the elders to the youth. The adults were physically and emotionally present to guide the youth through the closing of that neurological window.
Now, compare that historical evolutionary norm, a norm that literally kept human societies functioning for millennia, to our reality today. What do modern parents do during this window?
It is honestly bleak when you think about it.
It really is.
As we mentioned earlier, it starts early out of sheer survival. Parents hand a 2-year-old an iPad because they are just too busy to parent in that moment.
They need to answer work emails, they need to cook, they need to pay bills.
Right, so it starts with innocent little games and colorful cartoons. But the device remains in the child's hand as they grow.
It never leaves.
And by the time that child hits 12 years old, right, as that crucial window of puberty opens, right, as their identity is solidifying and the brain is locking in, where are they?
They are on Discord servers. They are in massive, anonymous online communities communicating with complete strangers.
Or they're endlessly scrolling through algorithmically generated feeds, watching loot videos of violence, extreme behavior, or highly polarized political content over and over again.
And the parents are completely, blissfully locked out of that digital world.
It's so ironic. Parents today hyper-fixate on physical safety. They will refuse to let a 10-year-old walk 3 blocks to the park alone because it's, quote-unquote, too dangerous.
Oh yeah, they buy the best organic food, they make sure the bicycle helmets are strapped perfectly.
But they digitally drop-kick their children into the absolute Wild West during their most vulnerable neurological window.
We meticulously protect their physical bodies while completely abandoning their cognitive and cultural development to the chaos of the internet.
Wow.
We have literally taken the most vital period of human rewiring, the exact biological moment when a person's adult identity solidifies, and we have handed the keys over to online weirdos.
We are allowing algorithms to socialize our youth.
Yes.
And this failure to guide them through the locking-in phase doesn't just harm the individual child. The sources make a massive pivot here to the macro level, which I find fascinating.
It's a huge shift in perspective.
Right. They argue that this threatens the very way human history and wisdom have been passed down since the dawn of language, which brings up this really fascinating pedagogical concept of vertical versus lateral cultural transmission.
This is a profound observation from Papa Bear's perspective. Every human society that has survived, whether you are looking at British society, American society, Jewish traditions, Hindu traditions, indigenous cultures, they have all relied on one primary mechanism for survival.
And that is vertical transmission.
Yes, vertical, from top to bottom, from the elders to the youth.
Passing down cultural wisdom.
Exactly. Passing down the stories, the shared historical references, the epic poems, the moral frameworks. This is how information evolves in a Darwinian sense.
Okay, so the older generation takes the accumulated wisdom of the past, maybe modifies it a tiny bit for the present environment, and directly hands it to the next generation.
Right. It gives the youth a solid foundation, an operating system, basically, for how to be a functional human being in their specific society.
And for centuries, the ultimate tool for this vertical transmission, alongside oral storytelling, obviously, has been the physical book.
Books are incredibly powerful meaning-making tools.
Right, because they require the author to synthesize deep thoughts, and they require the reader to sustain attention and actually engage with the wisdom of someone who came before them.
But Papa Bear points out a definitive, catastrophic rupture in this chain. He argues that this vertical line of transmission was effectively chopped off right around the early 2010s.
Which is the exact moment when smartphones became ubiquitous.
Yep, when social media moved from a desktop computer you occasionally logged into, directly into the pockets of adolescents 24/7.
So instead of receiving information vertically from adults and books, children today consume gigabytes of information laterally.
Laterally, from their peers, from other 12-year-olds on the internet.
They are taking in massive, totally unprecedented volumes of content, but it has zero depth.
None. It is just little shreds of video, 10 seconds here, 15 seconds there, a meme, a viral dance, a prank, a reaction video.
And these shreds do not add up to a cohesive narrative. They don't contain any cultural wisdom.
But they are highly stimulating.
Right. Let's use a metaphor here, because I think this is crucial for you listening to really grasp. Imagine your child's daily capacity for processing information is like their stomach.
Okay.
They need a certain amount of calories, or in this case, data every day. Vertical transmission is like serving them a complex, highly nutritious meal.
Right. It takes time to chew, it takes time to digest, but it builds bone and muscle.
Exactly. Lateral transmission, on the other hand, is like letting them eat 10,000 calories of cotton candy.
That is a perfect analogy. The cotton candy physically fills the stomach. The brain's incoming slots for the day are completely stuffed.
Right. So when you try to sit them down at the end of the day and serve them the nutritious meal, the cultural wisdom, the deep reading, the critical thinking skills, they physically cannot take it in.
They are stuffed to the brim, but they are entirely malnourished.
There's literally no room left for vertical wisdom.
And if we look at the trajectory of technology, this lateral flooding of the brain is only going to get worse. I mean, AI can now generate synthetic lateral content at an infinite scale.
It's terrifying.
Which is why Papa Bear argues that parents and schools are facing a true pedagogical imperative. We have to forcibly intervene.
We have to stop the endless stream of electronic devices and mandate a return to ordinary deep book reading to restore that vertical transmission.
We have to stop feeding them the cotton candy so they will actually be hungry for the meal.
Exactly. But, we can't pretend this macro-level cultural collapse just happened to us out of nowhere, like a hurricane or a weather event.
No, not at all.
The rise of screens happened simultaneously with something else. And the sources are brutally honest on this point. This crisis is the direct result of a measurable, data-backed decline in basic foundational parenting practices.
This is where we move from the neurological theory into the very uncomfortable reality of household habit.
Yeah, it gets a little personal here.
It does. We are in a measurable parenting crisis. This isn't just old school nostalgia. This is rooted in hard data. So let's look at the pillars of this data, starting with what the sources call the literary crisis.
Okay, this first stat is heartbreaking. 20 years ago, the data showed that roughly 18 to 20% of parents did not read regularly to their kids.
Which isn't ideal, obviously, but it's a distinct minority.
Right. Today, that number has skyrocketed to over 40%.
Almost half.
Almost half of children are not being read to by their own parents.
And the consequence of this is a phenomenon that early childhood educators call the million-word deficit.
The million-word deficit.
Yes. Research shows that kids who are not read to by their parents arrive in kindergarten having heard roughly 1 million fewer words than their peers who are read to regularly.
Wait, hold on. Let me push back on this just a bit on behalf of a modern parent.
Yes.
If my kid is watching, like, high-quality educational YouTube or playing heavily narrative-driven video games for 3 hours a day, aren't they hearing millions of words? The iPad talks constantly. Why does it specifically have to be a parent reading a physical book to prevent this deficit?
That is exactly the nuance we need to explore, and it comes right back to how the human brain processes language.
Okay.
The brain does not process language in a vacuum. It processes it relationally.
Relationally.
Yes. When a parent reads a book to a child, it is a dynamic, shared experience. The parent changes their inflection based on the child's reaction. They pause. They make eye contact.
The child points to a picture of a dog. The parent names it.
Exactly. It is active relational language processing.
Yeah.
When a child listens to a tablet, it is entirely passive auditory input. The screen does not care if the child is confused or distracted or engaged.
The screen just keeps talking.
Right. Passive audio simply does not myelinate the neural pathways for language and vocabulary the way relational reading does.
Wow. So by outsourcing the reading to an app, we are literally starving the relational pathway.
We are.
And that leads to the child stepping up to the starting line of their entire academic life, already a million words behind the kid sitting next to them.
That is a deficit that is incredibly hard to overcome.
It really is. And that flows right into the next data point the sources bring up: family dinners.
This one is huge. Less than half of American families report eating dinner together on a regular basis.
Which, again, I get it. Soccer practice goes late, both parents are working full-time, you hit the drive-through because it's survival mode.
It's the reality of modern schedules.
But the research shows that abandoning the family dinner removes massive protective factors for children.
The data on family meals is just astounding. Regular family dinners are statistically associated with lower rates of smoking, lower rates of high-risk behavior in adolescence, and higher success rates in college.
Wait, why? Is there, like, magic in the meatloaf?
No magic in the meatloaf. The magic is in the forced, consistent anchor of vertical transmission.
Oh, back to vertical transmission.
Yes. A family dinner is a dedicated 20 minutes where the lateral noise of the world is paused and the adults actually check in.
Phones away, screens off.
Exactly. It is where parents model adult conversation, conflict resolution, and emotional regulation. When you abandon the dinner table, you sever a daily tether to the family unit, and you leave the child completely adrift in the lateral current of their peers.
That makes total sense. Which brings us to the third failure in the data: screen controls. Only half of American families report using any screen controls or having any screen time limits for their kids.
Tying this back to our earlier discussion of the Skitterbox, we now have the neurological consensus that these apps function effectively as a behavioral drug.
They hijack the dopamine system.
They absolutely do. So statistically, half of the children walking around today are, as the sources bluntly phrase it, screened out zombies.
Screened out zombies.
By providing unlimited, unmonitored access to these devices, parents are knowingly allowing their children to be digitally drugged simply because it keeps the house quiet.
Ouch. That is a hard truth to swallow.
It is.
And finally, the fourth point: chores. 20 years ago, 80% of kids had regular chores. They had actual physical responsibilities in the household.
Today, that number has plummeted to 28%.
That is a massive drop.
Chores are another heavily associated protective factor, and they do two vital things. First, they teach consequence.
If you don't take out the trash, the kitchen smells terrible.
Right, basic cause and effect. Second, and honestly more importantly, they teach contribution to a community.
Okay, unpack that.
It signals to the child, you are a vital part of this family, and we actually rely on your labor to make this house function.
You matter to the operation of this home.
Exactly. When you remove chores, you teach the child that they are merely a consumer in a hotel, rather than a citizen in a community.
Man, I look at these 4 data points: reading a book, sitting down to eat dinner, turning off the iPad at a certain hour, and making them take out the trash.
They seem so basic.
We are completely dropping the ball on the easy wins. None of these require complex psychological interventions or, expensive therapy. These are the absolute basics of running a household.
They are the basics, yes. But synthesizing these 4 data points reveals a deeply uncomfortable truth.
Which is?
A collective failure of adult leadership.
Oof.
Parents today are frequently choosing short-term convenience over the hard, repetitive, exhausting work of child development.
Because it is infinitely easier to hand over the iPad than to enforce a screen limit and endure a 40-minute screaming tantrum.
It is. It is way easier to just load the dishwasher yourself than to teach a stubborn 8-year-old how to do it. It's easier to eat fast food in separate rooms than to force everyone to sit at a table and have a conversation.
We are refusing to recognize the problem because acknowledging it requires us to change our own comfortable habits.
Exactly.
But fixing these external routines requires a fundamental internal shift in how parents view their role. And according to the sources, that shift has to start with the very words we speak to our children.
Because children are not finished products.
Right.
They are development projects. They are constantly absorbing and internalizing their environment. And Papa Bear emphasizes a profound truth here that every parent needs to internalize.
What's that?
The way a parent communicates with their child literally becomes the inner voice in that child's head.
That is heavy. The parent's voice doesn't just disappear when the kid moves out and goes to college. It just moves inside.
It becomes the operating system for their internal monologue.
Think about how you talk to yourself when you make a mistake at work or when you face a daunting challenge.
Is that voice encouraging or is it viciously critical?
Wow. That voice was likely programmed in your early childhood.
Yep. If a parent uses harsh words, yelling, and demeaning language, they often justify it by claiming they are, quote-unquote, toughening the kid up for the real world.
But they aren't, are they?
No. Harsh words do not build toughness. They build deep-seated insecurity and anxiety.
Obviously, discipline is necessary. But the distinction the sources make is that discipline should correct the behavior without damaging the identity of the child.
That is the key difference.
Saying, hitting your brother is completely unacceptable and there will be a consequence, corrects the behavior. Saying, you are a bad, mean kid, what is wrong with you, damages the identity.
Precisely. And this is why Papa Bear focuses so heavily on the architecture of encouragement.
The architecture of encouragement.
Yes, but we need to be very clear about what encouragement actually is in this developmental context. It is not just empty cheerleading. Encouragement is a form of structure.
So encouragement isn't just standing on the sidelines with pom-poms shouting, yay, you're so smart, you're the best.
No, empty praise actually creates fragility because the moment the child fails, the praise feels like a lie. True encouragement is structural. It's actually building the structural scaffolding that the child uses to climb over the obstacles in their life.
Okay, give me an example of that.
So when a child hits a wall, say they are struggling with a really difficult homework assignment and they just want to quit.
Right.
If a parent looks at them and says, firmly and warmly, I know this is hard, but you can figure this out, the parent is providing structural support.
They're lending them their strength.
Exactly. The child hears that external voice, and over time they internalize it. That voice becomes their own resilience. Their inner voice says, this is hard, but I can figure this out.
But the sources warn that tone matters immensely here. You could literally say the exact right words, you read straight from a parenting script, but if your tone is exhausted, exasperated, or sarcastic, you create the completely wrong impact.
Oh, absolutely. Saying, sure, you can figure it out while rolling your eyes and looking at your phone is not structure, it's dismissal.
Tone conveys the emotional truth behind the words. And children are incredibly adept at reading emotional truth, even if they don't understand the vocabulary.
They pick up on everything. And alongside tone is consistency.
Right, consistency.
If a parent's communication is erratic-like, warm and supportive on Monday, but explosive and harsh on Tuesday because work was stressful, the child's inner world becomes erratic and highly anxious.
Because they never know which version of the parent they are going to get.
Exactly. So their nervous system stays in a constant state of hypervigilance. Stable, consistent communication creates a stable inner world. You aren't just reacting to a toddler's tantrum in the grocery store. You are actively programming the emotional resilience of a future adult.
It is an overwhelming responsibility when you frame it like that. Every single interaction is a line of code in their future operating system.
It really is.
And this careful, intentional communication is really just one half of the ultimate parenting equation. It's the relationship side. But an equation needs balance, right? The relationship must be balanced with boundaries.
Which brings us to the final and perhaps most actionable part of this whole deep dive. Papa Bear provides a very specific formula for boundaries, particularly crucial for kids 12 and under, before that puberty window completely locks in. We are talking about the balance of rules and relationships.
This is essentially the matrix of parenting. Let's walk through the different quadrants. First, the formula dictates that if you have rules without a relationship, it leads to rebellion.
This is the overbearing, strictly authoritarian parent, my way or the highway.
Right.
They enforce rigid rules, but they haven't put in the time to build emotional connection, empathy, or mutual respect. The child just feels controlled, not loved.
And inevitably, the moment the child is old enough to find an exit, they rebel against that cold, lifeless structure.
Exactly. Conversely, on the other side of the matrix, if you have a relationship without rules, it leads to aggression.
Aggression.
Yes, this is the permissive parent, the parent who desperately wants to be their kid's best friend. They hate conflict, so they just let the kid run the house, set their own bedtimes, eat whatever they want, and dictate the family schedule.
But eventually, the real world intervenes, right? The kid has to go to school where the parent finally hits their absolute breaking point and tries to pull the reins in and say no.
And what happens?
The child fights back, often aggressively.
Because they have never experienced a boundary. They have never been told no. So when a limit is finally imposed, they react with extreme hostility. They have been trained by the parent's permissiveness that they are the one in charge, and they will fight tooth and nail to maintain that control.
So the goal, obviously, is the sweet spot in the middle, the firm balance between rules and a warm relationship. And this leads to what Papa Bear calls rule number 1 of parenting. I think every parent should write this on a sticky note and put it on their bathroom mirror.
I agree completely.
Rule number 1, it is not your job to make your child like you. It is your job to make your child likable.
It is a brilliant, totally necessary reframing of the parental objective.
It shifts the mindset so completely. You aren't seeking a buddy to hang out with. You're undertaking the massive responsibility of raising a functional citizen.
You are trying to raise someone that other people will actually want to be around, want to employ, and want to build relationships with.
But achieving that requires the courage to enforce discipline. And this raises an important psychological question. Why are modern parents so deeply afraid of discipline?
The sources point to a tragic irony here. Parents are terrified that if they enforce a strict boundary, if they take away the phone at 8 p.m., if they enforce a curfew, if they say no to a party, the child will resent them.
They want to be loved now. They can't handle the momentary rejection of their child slamming a door and screaming, "I hate you."
Exactly. But the irony is, while a child might push back and throw a fit now when disciplined, failing to discipline them virtually guarantees that they will resent you deeply as adults.
Wait, really? Let's dig into that because it feels counterintuitive. If you let them do whatever they want, if you never enforce a curfew, shouldn't they grow up, look back and think, wow, my mom was the coolest, I had the best childhood? Why would they resent freedom?
Because of how the human psyche develops in relation to safety. We talked earlier about the brain's need for patterns, structure, and vertical transmission. Borders and boundaries are what make a child's unconscious emotional state feel safe.
They need to know how the world works.
Yes. They need to know exactly where the edge of the cliff is so they can play safely and freely in the meadow without falling off.
Ah, so the boundaries define the safe zone.
Precisely. If a parent provides infinite possibility, do whatever you want, go wherever you want, engage with whoever you want online, whenever you want, that is not freedom to a child.
It's not.
No, that is actually terrifying for their psychological framework. It induces a kind of psychological vertigo.
Vertigo.
Because a child simply does not have the cognitive maturity, the lived experience, or the prefrontal cortex development to handle infinite choice and zero consequences.
So what do?
They act out. They misbehave in increasingly extreme ways, unconsciously searching for the wall. They are begging an adult to step in and say, stop. And when they grow up and look back at a chaotic, boundaryless childhood, they don't think you were cool. They look at the struggles they have as adults and they ask, why did my parents let me do that? Why didn't they care enough to stop me?
They realize that the freedom was actually just neglect disguised as coolness.
Yes.
They need the walls to feel safe in the room.
Yes.
By enforcing a rule, even if they cry and scream in the moment, you are fundamentally communicating, I love you and care about you enough to keep you within a safe parameter.
Exactly. You're sacrificing their momentary approval for their long-term psychological security and moral development. You are doing the hard work of acting as the adult.
Man, this has been an incredibly intense journey today. We have covered massive, sweeping ground on this deep dive.
We really have.
We started with the absolute biological necessity of letting our kids sit in the discomfort of boredom, recognizing that the empty space is the only place where true creativity and imagination can be born.
Right. And we explored the terrifying reality of the Skinner box sitting in our pockets and how the variable ratio algorithms of modern touchscreens are fundamentally aggressively different from the passive TV watching of our own youth.
We examine the hard biology of it all, Jonathan Haidt's insights into the ruthlessness of synaptic pruning, and how we are actively carving our children's neural pathways based on the digital habits we allow into the home.
We talked about the critical, fleeting window of puberty where the brain locks in its identity. And we highlighted the profound tragedy of modern parents outsourcing the socialization of our youth to online strangers instead of guiding them through traditional rites of passage.
We looked at the loss of vertical cultural transmission, how we are filling their daily cognitive capacity with lateral, cotton candy-like shreds of nothing, entirely at the expense of our generational wisdom.
And we faced the undeniable, measurable data. The devastating decline in reading leading to a million-word deficit, the loss of family dinners, the total lack of screen controls, and the disappearance of chores. All pointing to a pervasive crisis in adult leadership and a prioritization of convenience over development.
Which all circles back to the inner voice we are building for them line by line, and the absolute necessity of balancing warm, encouraging relationships with firm, unapologetic rules, making them likable citizens, not just trying to make them like us in the moment.
It is a comprehensive, honestly somewhat daunting picture of a society at a tipping point. And looking at all this source material, synthesizing Papa Bear's pedagogical warnings with Jonathan Haidt's neurological data, I'm left with one final, very provocative thought that builds on everything we've unpacked today.
Lay it on us.
We have spent this entire time analyzing what happens to a child when we raise a generation primarily through lateral transmission, when their brains are pruned by variable reward algorithms and their identities are formed by the chaotic noise of online peers instead of the quiet vertical wisdom of their elders.
Right.
But the lingering question we have to ask ourselves now is, what happens when they become the adults?
Oh, wow.
Can a generation that was never allowed to be bored, whose brains were aggressively pruned away from sustained focus, and who were never taught to build their own internal boundaries, can they successfully become the vertical transmitters for the next era of humanity?
Man.
Because you cannot pass down a cultural operating system that was never installed in you in the first place.
That is a heavy, chilling question to sit with. And honestly, it makes me want to go look at a blank wall for a few minutes and just let my brain work in the silence. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive today. I highly encourage you to take a hard, honest look at the screens in your house, the routines at your dinner table, and maybe, just maybe, look at your kids' whining boredom in a whole new light. It might just be the absolute best thing for them. Until next time.